Marcus Wellington walked through the airport terminal with his small black backpack over one shoulder. He wore simple blue jeans and a black sweater. His sneakers were comfortable and worn. Nobody would guess by looking at him that he owned one of the biggest technology companies in America. Nobody would know that his bank account had more money than most people could imagine. That was exactly how Marcus liked it. He preferred to dress simply when he traveled. He did not wear expensive suits or flashy watches. He did not need people to recognize him or treat him differently. Marcus believed that respect should not depend on how much money someone had. It should depend on how they treated other people. Today he was flying to London for an important meeting. His foundation was planning to open new schools in Africa. They would spend millions of dollars to help children get a good education. Marcus had worked hard to build his company, and now he wanted to help others have the same chances he had. He walked to the gate for Flight 247. The plane would leave in 40 minutes. Marcus found a quiet seat near the window and pulled out his laptop. He had documents to review before the meeting. Charts and numbers filled his screen. He was so focused on his work that he barely noticed when they called his row to board. Marcus was one of the first people to step onto the plane. He had a seat in first class. The ticket had cost a lot of money, but his assistant had booked it for him. Marcus would have been happy in economy class, but the flight was long and he needed to work. The first-class cabin was beautiful. The seats were wide and covered in soft leather. Each seat had plenty of space and its own television screen. The lights were soft and warm. Soft music played quietly in the background. Marcus found his seat by the window and settled in. He put his backpack under the seat in front of him and opened his laptop again. Other passengers began to fill the cabin. An older woman in a designer dress sat across the aisle. She had 3 large bags that she struggled to lift. A flight attendant rushed over to help her. Behind her, a young man in an expensive suit talked loudly on his phone about some business deal. He laughed and bragged about how much money he was making. Marcus watched them quietly. He had been around wealthy people his whole life. Some were kind and humble. Others loved to show off their money. Marcus had learned long ago that money did not make someone a good person. Character made someone good. How they treated others made them good. A flight attendant entered the cabin. Her name tag said Rebecca. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was neat and pressed. She smiled brightly as she greeted the passengers. Her voice was warm and friendly. "Good morning, everyone," Rebecca said. "Welcome to Flight 247 to London. We are so happy to have you with us today. Please let me know if you need anything at all." She walked down the aisle, checking that everyone had found their seats. She helped the older woman put her bag in the overhead bin. She complimented the businessman on his tie. She chatted with a family traveling with 2 small children. Rebecca seemed professional and kind. When she reached Marcus, something changed. Her bright smile faded. Her warm voice became flat and cold. She barely looked at him. "Ticket," she said shortly. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "I'm sorry?" "Your ticket. I need to see your boarding pass." Marcus was confused. She had not asked anyone else to show their ticket. Everyone else had just sat down. But he did not want to cause trouble. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He showed her the digital boarding pass on his screen. Rebecca looked at it carefully. Too carefully. She checked the seat number 3 times. She looked at his face, then back at the screen. Finally, she handed the phone back to him without a word. She did not smile. She did not welcome him to the flight. She just walked away. Marcus felt a small knot form in his stomach. He knew that feeling. He had felt it many times before in his life. It was the feeling of being judged. The feeling of being seen as less than others. The feeling of not belonging. But Marcus was used to it. He had built his entire company while people doubted him. He had succeeded while others said he would fail. He had learned to stay calm and dignified, no matter how people treated him, so he took a deep breath and returned to his work. More passengers boarded the plane. The cabin filled up. Soon every seat was taken. The pilot made an announcement about the weather and flight time. The plane pushed back from the gate and began to taxi toward the runway. Rebecca and another flight attendant began to prepare for takeoff. They walked through the cabin, checking that everyone had their seatbelts on. They made sure all bags were stored properly. They demonstrated how to use the safety equipment. Rebecca's voice was cheerful again as she spoke to the other passengers. But when she passed Marcus, she said nothing. The plane took off smoothly. Marcus watched out the window as the ground fell away below them. The city became smaller and smaller. Soon they were flying through white clouds. The seatbelt sign turned off and people began to relax. Rebecca came down the aisle with a cart. It was time for the first beverage service. Marcus could smell fresh coffee brewing. He heard the pop of champagne bottles opening. First-class passengers always got special treatment. That was what they paid for. Rebecca smiled warmly at each passenger. "Good morning. What can I get for you to drink today? We have champagne, orange juice, coffee, tea, or anything else you would like." The older woman ordered champagne. "Oh, how lovely," Rebecca said. She poured the golden liquid into a crystal glass. "Here you are, enjoy." The businessman wanted coffee. "Of course," Rebecca said brightly. She poured it from a silver pot into a china cup. "Would you like cream or sugar?" The family with children got orange juice in proper glasses. Rebecca even brought special cookies for the kids. They giggled and thanked her. Then she reached Marcus. Her smile disappeared again. She did not make eye contact. She stood there with her cart waiting. "Good morning," Marcus said politely. "Could I please have sparkling water with lime?" Rebecca said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded once and walked away with her cart. She did not say she would be right back. She did not smile. She just left. Marcus waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Rebecca served drinks to all the passengers in the rows behind him. She laughed with them. She chatted about the weather and their travel plans. But she did not bring Marcus his water. Finally, after 15 minutes, Rebecca returned. She had a plastic cup in her hand, the kind of cup they used in economy class. It was filled with plain water from the tap. There was no sparkle to the water. There was no lime. She put the cup down on Marcus's tray table without a word. Some of the water sloshed over the side. Then she turned and walked away. Marcus looked at the plastic cup. Around him, every other passenger had crystal glasses. They had champagne and fresh coffee. They had been served with smiles and kind words. He had a plastic cup of tap water. The older woman across the aisle noticed. She looked at Marcus, then at his cup. Her eyebrows rose. She looked confused and uncomfortable. The businessman behind Marcus saw it too. He frowned and shook his head slightly. Marcus picked up the plastic cup and took a sip. The water was lukewarm. He set it back down and returned to his laptop. His hands were steady. His face was calm. But inside his heart was heavy. Some things never changed, no matter how successful you became. An hour into the flight, Marcus stood up and stretched his legs. He had been working on his laptop for a long time. His back was stiff and his neck hurt a little. He decided to take a short walk to the bathroom. The cabin was quiet now. Most passengers were watching movies on their screens or reading books. Some were sleeping under soft blankets. The lights had been dimmed to help people rest. Marcus noticed that everyone in first class seemed comfortable and happy. He walked down the aisle toward the bathroom. As he passed the galley, he saw Rebecca and another flight attendant inside. The other attendant was a young man named James. He looked to be in his 20s. He had kind eyes and a friendly smile. James was arranging snacks on a tray. Rebecca was checking something on a tablet. They were talking quietly to each other. When Marcus walked past, their conversation stopped. Rebecca glanced at him with cold eyes, then looked away quickly. Marcus used the bathroom and walked back to his seat. As he passed the galley again, he felt the temperature. The cabin had become quite cold. The air conditioning must have been turned up too high. Marcus was only wearing his thin sweater. He was starting to feel uncomfortable. He stopped at the galley entrance. Rebecca was still there organizing bottles and glasses. Marcus cleared his throat politely. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was respectful and quiet. Rebecca looked up. Her expression showed annoyance. "Yes? I'm sorry to bother you. The cabin seems quite cold. Would it be possible to get a blanket?" Rebecca stared at him for a moment. Then she looked over her shoulder at the storage compartment behind her. Marcus could see it clearly. There were at least 6 or 7 blankets folded neatly on the shelf. They were the good blankets, the ones made of soft fleece that first-class passengers received. Rebecca looked back at Marcus. "We're out of blankets," she said flatly. Marcus blinked. He had just seen the blankets right behind her. "Oh, I thought I saw some on the shelf there." "Those are reserved for other passengers," Rebecca said. Her tone was sharp now. "We don't have any available for you." James stopped what he was doing. He looked at Rebecca, then at the blankets, then at Marcus. His face showed confusion and discomfort. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. He looked down at his tray and said nothing. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger, but sadness. Deep sadness. He took a slow breath. "I understand," he said quietly. "Thank you anyway." He walked back to his seat and sat down. He rubbed his arms to warm them up. The older woman across the aisle was wrapped in a blanket. So was the businessman behind him. Everyone had blankets except Marcus. The older woman noticed him shivering slightly. She frowned and pressed her call button. When James came over, she spoke to him quietly. "Excuse me, young man. My neighbor there seems cold. Could you bring him a blanket, please?" James looked uncomfortable. He glanced back toward the galley where Rebecca was watching. I'll check on that," he said weakly. But he did not bring a blanket. He disappeared into the galley and did not come back out. The older woman looked shocked. She turned to Marcus. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I don't understand what's happening." "This is terrible service," Marcus gave her a small smile. "It's okay. Please don't worry about it. I'll be fine." But the woman shook her head. She pulled off her own blanket. "Here, take mine." "I have my sweater on." "I'll be fine." "No, please," Marcus said gently. "I can't take your blanket. You paid for your seat just like I did. You should be comfortable." "So should you," the woman said firmly. But Marcus politely refused again. She finally kept her blanket but looked very upset about the whole situation. Another hour passed. Marcus tried to focus on his work, but it was difficult. He was cold and uncomfortable. His plastic cup of water was long empty. He had not been offered a refill while everyone else had fresh drinks. Then the smell of food filled the cabin. It was time for the meal service. In first class, passengers could choose between two special meals. One was grilled salmon with vegetables. The other was beef tenderloin with mashed potatoes. Both were prepared by professional chefs and served on real plates with metal silverware. Rebecca came down the aisle with the meal cart. She was smiling again. Her voice was bright and cheerful as she spoke to each passenger. "Good afternoon. We have two wonderful choices for your meal today. We have a delicious grilled salmon with roasted vegetables and herb butter, or we have a tender beef fillet with garlic mashed potatoes and asparagus. Which would you prefer?" The older woman chose the salmon. "Excellent choice," Rebecca said warmly. She placed the meal on the woman's tray table. It looked beautiful on the white plate. Steam rose from the hot food. "Can I get you anything else? More champagne, perhaps?" The businessman chose the beef. "Of course," Rebecca said. "I think you'll really enjoy it. The chef made it perfectly today." She served him with a smile and offered fresh bread and butter. Down the aisle she went. Every passenger received their meal with care and attention. Rebecca described the food. She made suggestions. She offered drinks and extra items. She was the perfect flight attendant. Then she reached Marcus. The smile left her face immediately. She did not ask him what he wanted. She did not describe the meals. She just stood there with her cart looking at him with blank eyes. I would like the salmon, please," Marcus said politely. Rebecca did not respond right away. She looked at her cart. She moved some things around. She frowned. "We're out of both meals," she finally said. Marcus stared at her. "Both meals?" "Yes, we don't have any left." Marcus could see that this was not true. There were at least 4 meals still on her cart. He could see the covered plates clearly, but he said nothing. What could he say? If he complained, he would be called angry or difficult. If he pointed out the obvious lie, he would cause a scene. So he stayed quiet. "What can you offer me instead?" Marcus asked calmly. Rebecca reached under her cart. She pulled out a small plastic-wrapped sandwich, the kind of sandwich they served in economy class. It was ham and cheese on white bread. It looked dry and sad compared to the beautiful hot meals everyone else was eating. "This?" Rebecca said. She dropped it on his tray table. The businessman behind Marcus leaned forward. He had been watching everything. "Excuse me," he said to Rebecca. "I saw you have meals left on your cart. Why can't you give him one?" Rebecca's face turned red. "The meals are allocated to specific passengers," she said quickly. "They're assigned in advance." "That doesn't make sense," the businessman said. "He's a first-class passenger just like the rest of us." "Sir, I don't make the rules," Rebecca said. Her voice was tight now. "I'm just following procedures." "What procedures?" The older woman joined in. She looked angry now. This young man paid the same amount we all did. He deserves the same meal we're getting. Other passengers started to notice the commotion. Heads turned. People stopped eating to watch. The cabin was no longer quiet and peaceful. James appeared from the galley. He could sense the tension. "Is everything okay here?" he asked nervously. "No, everything is not okay," the businessman said. "Your colleague here is treating this passenger very differently from everyone else, and we'd all like to know why." James looked at Marcus, then at the sandwich on his tray. Then he looked at the meal still on Rebecca's cart. His face showed understanding and shame. He knew exactly what was happening. "Rebecca," James said quietly.
"Maybe we should—" "James, go back to the galley," Rebecca interrupted him sharply.
"I'm handling this." But Marcus spoke up before anyone else could argue. His voice was gentle and calm. "It's okay, everyone, really. I appreciate your concern, but please don't worry. The sandwich is fine." "It's not fine," the older woman said. "This is discrimination. That's what this is." The word hung in the air. Discrimination. Everyone knew it was true. They could all see what was happening. It was obvious and ugly and wrong. Marcus unwrapped his sandwich slowly. "Please, I don't want any trouble. Let's just all enjoy our meals. The flight will be over soon." The businessman looked like he wanted to say more. So did the older woman. But they could see that Marcus wanted to let it go. They could see his dignity and grace. So they stopped arguing, even though it felt wrong to stay quiet. Rebecca quickly finished serving the other passengers and rushed back to the galley with her cart. James followed her. Through the gap in the curtain, passengers could hear them arguing in harsh whispers. But no one could hear what they were saying. Marcus ate his sandwich. It was dry, just as he had expected. The bread was stale. The ham was thin and tasteless. Around him, people ate gourmet meals on china plates. They drank wine from crystal glasses. They had warm bread and fresh desserts. Marcus had a plastic-wrapped sandwich and a cup of tap water in a plastic cup. The older woman could not take it anymore. She cut her salmon in half. "Please," she said to Marcus, holding out her plate. "Take some of mine. I can't eat it all anyway." Marcus looked at her kind face. He saw real concern in her eyes. Real caring. It touched his heart. Here was a stranger willing to share her meal with him. A stranger willing to stand up for him when no one else would. "Thank you," Marcus said softly. "Thank you so much for your kindness. But I can't take your food. You don't have to share what you paid for. The sandwich is enough for me." "But it's not right," she said. Tears filled her eyes. "It's just not right what she did to you." In the cockpit, Captain David Morrison checked his instruments. Everything looked good. The flight was smooth and on schedule. They would land in London in about 4 hours. It was a routine flight, the kind he had flown 1,000 times before. David had been a pilot for 30 years. He loved his job. He loved the freedom of flying. He loved helping people travel safely to see their families and do their business. He took pride in running a professional operation. He expected his crew to treat every passenger with respect and dignity. David believed that everyone who stepped onto his plane deserved excellent service. It did not matter if they were rich or poor, young or old, famous or unknown. A passenger was a passenger. They all deserved kindness. "I'm going to walk through the cabin," David told his co-pilot. "Stretch my legs a bit. You have the controls." "Yes, sir," the co-pilot said. David left the cockpit and entered the first-class cabin. He liked to walk through the plane during long flights. It helped him stay alert. It also let him see how his crew was doing and how the passengers were feeling. A good captain knew what was happening in every part of his aircraft. As he walked down the aisle, David smiled and nodded at passengers. Most were watching movies or sleeping. A few were reading. One older woman smiled at him warmly, but there was something in her eyes, something that looked like concern or worry. David continued walking. He passed a businessman who was typing on his laptop. The man looked up at the captain and shook his head slightly as if disappointed about something. That was strange. Then David saw him, a man sitting by the window working on his laptop. He wore simple clothes and had a calm, focused expression. His tray table had only an empty plastic cup and a crumpled sandwich wrapper. The plastic cup stood out immediately. Everyone else in first class had proper glassware. David slowed his walk. Something felt wrong. He looked around the cabin more carefully. He noticed that other passengers were glancing at this man, then looking away quickly. The atmosphere felt tense. "Good afternoon," David said, stopping beside Marcus. "How's everything today?" Marcus looked up from his laptop. He saw the captain's uniform and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Captain." "Everything is fine, thank you. First time flying with us?" David asked. "No, I fly with this airline quite often, actually," Marcus said. "I travel a lot for work." "And what kind of work do you do?" "I run a technology company," Marcus said simply. "We develop software and hardware solutions. Recently, we've been working on sustainable aviation fuel. We're trying to make flying more environmentally friendly." David's eyes lit up. "Really? That's fascinating. I've been following the development of sustainable fuels for years. The industry needs to change. Traditional jet fuel is terrible for the environment." "Exactly," Marcus said. He sat up straighter, engaged in the conversation. "We've been testing a new biofuel blend that reduces carbon emissions by 40%. The early results are very promising." For the next few minutes, they talked about aviation technology. Marcus explained the science behind sustainable fuels. David shared his experience flying different types of aircraft. They discussed the future of aviation and how it could become cleaner and more efficient. David was impressed. This passenger clearly knew what he was talking about. He was intelligent and knowledgeable. He spoke with passion about making the world better. David enjoyed talking with him. Then Rebecca appeared. She was carrying a trash bag, collecting garbage from passengers. She walked down the aisle with a smile, thanking people as they handed her their used napkins and empty cups. When she reached David and Marcus, her smile disappeared. She looked at the captain and said, "Excuse me, Captain Morrison, do you need anything?" Her voice was respectful and professional when she spoke to David, but she did not even glance at Marcus. It was as if he did not exist. "No, thank you, Rebecca," David said. "I'm just chatting with this gentleman about aviation technology." "Of course," Rebecca said. She reached across and grabbed the plastic cup and sandwich wrapper from Marcus's tray without asking. She did it quickly, almost rudely. Then she walked away without another word to Marcus. David's smile faded. He watched Rebecca walk down the aisle. Then he looked back at Marcus's tray table. He saw the plastic cup in Rebecca's trash bag. He thought about all the crystal glasses he had seen on other passengers' tray tables. Something clicked in David's mind. The plastic cup, the sandwich wrapper, the tense atmosphere, the way Rebecca had just ignored this passenger completely while speaking to him. The concerned looks from other passengers. David had been a captain long enough to recognize what he had just witnessed. His jaw tightened. His eyes grew hard, but he kept his voice calm and professional. "It was a pleasure talking with you," David said to Marcus. "I hope the rest of your flight is comfortable. If you need anything at all, please let me know personally." There was emphasis on those last words. "Let me know personally." Marcus understood. He nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that." David gave him a meaningful look, then continued walking through the cabin. But his mind was racing. He had been so focused on their conversation that he had not immediately noticed the signs. But now they were obvious. The plastic cup, the sandwich wrapper in first class, the way his flight attendant had treated this passenger. David reached the back galley where Patricia, his senior flight attendant, was preparing coffee. Patricia had worked with David for 15 years. She was excellent at her job. She was professional, kind, and observant. If something was wrong on this flight, Patricia would know about it. "Patricia," David said quietly, "can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Captain," Patricia said. She put down the coffee pot and stepped aside with him. "Tell me honestly, have you noticed anything unusual during this flight? Any problems with the crew or passengers?" Patricia's face changed. She looked uncomfortable. She glanced toward the first-class cabin, then back at David. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to say anything," she said quietly. "Tell me," David said firmly. Patricia took a deep breath. "It's Rebecca. She's been treating one of the first-class passengers very poorly, the gentleman in seat 3A, the one you were just talking to." "What has she been doing?" "She gave him tap water in a plastic cup while everyone else got crystal glasses. She told him we were out of blankets even though there were 6 blankets right behind her. She gave him an economy sandwich while everyone else got their choice of proper meals. She's been ignoring him and treating him like he doesn't belong in first class." David's expression grew darker with each sentence. How long has this been going on? Since boarding. I've been watching, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to cause conflict with Rebecca in front of passengers. But I was about to come talk to you. This has gone too far. Has anyone else noticed? Oh yes, several passengers have noticed. Some of them tried to speak up during the meal service. They could see what was happening. It's been very uncomfortable. David was quiet for a moment. His hands clenched into fists, then relaxed. He had seen a lot in 30 years of flying. He had dealt with difficult passengers, emergency situations, and crew conflicts. But discrimination was something he would never tolerate. Not on his aircraft. Not ever. Where is Rebecca now? In the front galley with James. Get her and bring her to the back galley. You and James both now, Patricia nodded. She could hear the steel in David's voice. She walked quickly toward the front of the plane. David waited in the back galley. He looked out the small window at the clouds passing by. They were flying at 35,000 feet. The sky was clear and blue. It should have been a perfect flight. But Rebecca had turned it into something ugly. David thought about the passenger in seat 3A. The intelligent, kind man who loved aviation technology. The man who was trying to make flying better for everyone. The man who had been treated like garbage on David's plane. No. This would not stand. Patricia returned with Rebecca and James. Rebecca looked annoyed at being pulled away from her duties. James looked worried. He knew something bad was about to happen. Close the curtain, David said. Patricia pulled the curtain closed, blocking the view from the passenger cabin. David looked at Rebecca directly. His voice was quiet but hard as steel. I want you to explain to me why the passenger in seat 3A has been treated differently from every other passenger in first class. Rebecca's face went pale. I don't know what you mean, Captain. Don't lie to me, David said. I've been told exactly what's been happening. The plastic cup. The refusal to give him a blanket. The sandwich instead of a proper meal. I've seen some of it with my own eyes. Now I want to hear your explanation. Rebecca looked at Patricia and James, then back at David. She opened her mouth but no words came out. I'm waiting, David said. I treated him the same as everyone else, Rebecca finally said, but her voice was weak. That's not true, Patricia said firmly. I watched you, Rebecca. I saw everything you did. You treated that man terribly from the moment he boarded. I was just doing my job, Rebecca said. Her voice was getting defensive now. Your job is to treat every passenger with respect and excellent service, David said. That's what you're paid to do. That's what this airline demands. So tell me why you didn't do your job. Rebecca said nothing. She looked at the floor. James spoke up quietly. Captain, I want to apologize. I saw what was happening. I should have said something. I should have stopped it. I didn't, and I'm sorry. David looked at James. He could see genuine remorse in the young man's eyes. We'll discuss your role later, David said. Right now I'm focused on Rebecca. Rebecca, David said again. I'm going to ask you one more time. Why did you treat that passenger the way you did? Rebecca looked up. Her face was red now. Her eyes were angry. Because he doesn't belong in first class, she said. The words burst out of her like she had been holding them in for hours. People like him don't belong there. The galley went silent. Patricia gasped. James's eyes went wide. Even Rebecca seemed shocked by what she had just said. People like him, David repeated slowly. What exactly do you mean by that? Rebecca realized her mistake. She tried to backtrack. I just meant... I didn't mean... I know exactly what you meant, David said. His voice was ice cold now. And it's the most disgraceful thing I've heard in my 30 years of flying. David stared at Rebecca with eyes that could cut through steel. The small galley felt even smaller now. The air was thick with tension. Patricia stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head in disappointment. James looked like he wanted to disappear. Do you understand what you just admitted? David asked Rebecca. His voice was quiet but filled with controlled anger. Do you understand what you just said? Rebecca's face had gone from red to white. She looked terrified now. Captain, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then how did you mean it? David asked. Explain to me what you meant when you said that passenger doesn't belong in first class. What makes him different from every other person sitting in that cabin? Rebecca opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew there was no good answer. Any answer she gave would make things worse. She had revealed her true feelings, and now there was no taking it back. "I'll tell you what the difference is," David said. "There is no difference. He bought a ticket just like everyone else. He paid the same amount of money as everyone else. He followed all the rules and behaved with perfect courtesy. The only thing that makes him different is your prejudice." "I'm not prejudiced," Rebecca said weakly. "Yes, you are," Patricia said firmly. "I've worked with you for 2 years, Rebecca. I've seen how you treat certain passengers. I've noticed the pattern. I should have reported it before now. That's my fault, but I'm not staying silent anymore." Rebecca looked betrayed. "Patricia, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Patricia interrupted. "This job is about service. It's about treating every single person who steps on this plane with dignity and respect. It doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from or what you think about them. They're passengers. They deserve our best." James spoke up quietly. "Captain, I need to say something. When we were serving the meals, I told Rebecca she should give the passenger in 3A one of the proper dinners. She told me to mind my own business. She said she was the senior attendant and she would handle it her way." Rebecca spun toward James. "You're throwing me under the bus?" "I'm telling the truth," James said. "I should have told it sooner. I should have stood up to you when you refused to give him a blanket. I should have insisted you treat him properly. But I was afraid of conflict. I was wrong." David looked at James with a mixture of disappointment and respect. The young man had failed to act in the moment, but at least he was owning up to it now. That took courage. "James, you will complete additional training on how to handle situations like this," David said. "A crew member must always speak up when they see something wrong. Silence makes you part of the problem. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," James said. "I understand completely. It won't happen again." David turned back to Rebecca. "This airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Zero tolerance. Do you know what that means?" Rebecca nodded slowly. Tears started to form in her eyes. "Are you going to fire me?" "I'm going to file a complete report with the company," David said. "That decision will be made by management. But I can tell you this, you will never work on one of my flights again. Ever." "Captain, please," Rebecca said. Tears were running down her face now. "I've worked for this airline for 5 years. I have bills to pay. I have a family. Please don't ruin my career over one mistake." "One mistake?" Patricia said in disbelief. "Rebecca, you spent hours treating that man like trash. You did it deliberately. You did it with full awareness. That's not one mistake. That's a choice you made over and over again. And it's not just about you anymore," David added. "Think about that passenger. Think about how you made him feel. Think about the other passengers who had to witness your behavior. You made everyone on this plane uncomfortable. You brought shame to this airline and to this crew." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "What about him? He must have done something. Maybe he was rude or demanding." "Stop," David said sharply. "Just stop. I spoke with that gentleman myself. He was polite, intelligent, and gracious. And even if he had been rude, that would not excuse your behavior. You don't get to decide who deserves good service based on how they look or whether you like them." Patricia walked closer to Rebecca. Her voice was softer now but still firm. "Rebecca, I want you to really think about this. What if that passenger had been your father? Your brother? Your son? What if someone treated them the way you treated that man today? How would you feel?" Rebecca said nothing. She just cried quietly. "For the rest of this flight you will stay in this galley," David said. "You will not interact with passengers. Patricia and James will handle the cabin service. When we land, you will report directly to your supervisor. Do you understand?" "Yes, Captain," Rebecca whispered. David looked at Patricia and James. "Make sure the rest of this flight goes smoothly. And please discreetly check on the passenger in 3A. Make sure he has everything he needs. Tell him it comes with my personal apology." "Yes, sir," Patricia said. David opened the curtain and left the galley. He walked through the first-class cabin toward the cockpit. As he passed Marcus's seat, he slowed down. Marcus was working on his laptop again, calm and focused as if nothing had happened. David almost stopped to say something, but he decided against it. He would speak to the passenger after they landed. For now, the best thing he could do was fly the plane safely and make sure the rest of the flight went well. As David entered the cockpit, his mind was racing. In 30 years of flying, he had dealt with many difficult situations. Bad weather, mechanical problems, medical emergencies, unruly passengers. But discrimination from his own crew? That cut deep. That felt personal. Back in the galley, Rebecca sat on a small jump seat with her face in her hands. Patricia prepared a tray with fresh drinks and snacks. James helped her quietly. "What you did was wrong," Patricia said to Rebecca as she worked. "But I hope you learn from this. I hope you become a better person because of it." Rebecca looked up with red eyes. "My career is over." "Maybe," Patricia said honestly. "Or maybe this is your chance to change, to become the person you should have been all along." James carried the tray into the first-class cabin. He walked directly to Marcus's seat. His hands were shaking slightly. "Excuse me, sir," James said quietly. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "I want to apologize to you. I saw how you were treated today and I didn't speak up. I should have. I'm very sorry." Marcus looked at the young man's sincere face. He could see real remorse there. Real understanding. "Thank you for saying that," Marcus said gently. "I appreciate your apology. The captain wanted me to bring you these," James said. He placed fresh bottles of water, juice, and snacks on Marcus's tray table. "If you need anything else, anything at all, please let me know. We want the rest of your flight to be comfortable." "Thank you, James," Marcus said, reading the young man's name tag. "You know, the hardest thing isn't standing up to people who are being wrong. The hardest thing is finding the courage to speak up when you might face consequences, but that's when it matters most." James nodded slowly. "I understand that now, sir. I really do. Learn from this moment," Marcus said. "Let it make you stronger and braver. The next time you see something wrong, you'll know what to do." "I will, sir," James said. "I promise." After James left, the older woman across the aisle leaned toward Marcus. "I'm glad the captain did something," she said. "What that woman did was terrible. Absolutely terrible." "Thank you for speaking up earlier," Marcus said. "You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," the woman said. "We all should have done more. I'm embarrassed that it took so long for someone to stop her." The businessman behind Marcus tapped his shoulder. "I'm going to write a letter to the airline about what I witnessed today. Other passengers should too. They need to know what happened." "I appreciate that," Marcus said. "But please don't let this experience make you think badly of everyone who works for this airline. Most people are good. Most people want to do the right thing. Sometimes fear or uncertainty stops them, but their hearts are in the right place." The businessman looked surprised. "You're being very generous after what you went through." Marcus smiled sadly. "I've been through worse. Much worse. This isn't my first time experiencing this kind of treatment. It probably won't be my last. But I've learned that holding on to anger only hurts me. It doesn't change anything. What changes things is how we respond." "How can you be so calm?" the older woman asked. "I'm angry and it didn't even happen to me." "Because I've learned something important over the years," Marcus said. "People like Rebecca act from fear and ignorance. They've been taught to see the world in a certain way. They believe things that aren't true. Getting angry at them doesn't change their minds, it just confirms what they already think." "So what does change their minds?" the businessman asked. "Education, experience, meeting people who challenge their assumptions. Sometimes consequences too," Marcus admitted. Rebecca needed to face consequences for her actions. But more than that, she needs to understand why what she did was wrong. She needs to grow as a person. The older woman shook her head in amazement. "You're a remarkable person. I don't think I could be so understanding." "You already were," Marcus pointed out. "You offered me your blanket. You spoke up when you saw something wrong. You showed me kindness when someone else showed me cruelty. That's what makes the difference in this world. Not the people who do wrong, but the people who stand up against it." For the rest of the flight, the cabin was peaceful. Patricia and James provided excellent service to everyone. They were especially attentive to Marcus, making sure he was comfortable. But Marcus didn't need special treatment now. He just needed what everyone deserved: basic respect and dignity. 3 hours later, the plane began its descent into London. The pilot announced they would be landing in 20 minutes. Passengers put away their laptops and books. They raised their window shades and returned their seats to the upright position. Marcus looked out his window at the city below. London looked beautiful from the air. He could see the Thames River winding through the city like a silver ribbon. He could see the historic buildings and modern skyscrapers standing side by side. He thought about the meeting he would attend tomorrow. His foundation was going to help thousands of children get an education. They would build schools and train teachers. They would provide books and computers. They would change lives. That was what mattered, not what one flight attendant thought of him, not how he had been treated on one flight. What mattered was the work he did and the difference he made in the world. The plane touched down smoothly. The passengers applauded as they often did after a long flight. The plane taxied to the gate and came to a stop. The seatbelt sign turned off. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain David Morrison's voice came over the speaker. "Welcome to London. Before you leave the aircraft, I want to address something that happened during this flight." The cabin went quiet. Everyone stopped gathering their belongings and listened. "Today, one of my flight attendants failed to provide the level of service that this airline promises and that every passenger deserves," David continued. "This is unacceptable. I want to personally apologize to the passenger who was affected and to all of you who witnessed it. This airline has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, and that policy will be enforced." People looked at Marcus. Some nodded their approval. The older woman reached across and squeezed his hand. "We are better than what you saw today," David continued, "and we will do better. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I hope you will give us another chance to show you the service you deserve." The speaker clicked off. For a moment, no one moved. Then the businessman started to clap. The older woman joined him. Soon, the entire first-class cabin was applauding. They weren't clapping for the captain's words. They were clapping for Marcus. For his dignity, for his grace, for the way he had handled an impossible situation. Marcus felt his throat get tight. He smiled and nodded his thanks. But he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. As passengers began to leave the plane, Marcus waited. He liked to be one of the last people off. It was less crowded that way. Captain David Morrison appeared from the cockpit. He walked straight to Marcus's seat and held out his hand. "Sir, I owe you an apology," David said. "What happened on this flight should never have happened. I take full responsibility as the captain of this aircraft." Marcus shook his hand. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate you taking action." "May I ask your name, sir?" "Marcus Wellington." David's eyes widened slightly. The name was familiar. He had heard it somewhere before, but he couldn't quite place it. "Mr. Wellington, I want to assure you that this incident will be fully investigated. The crew member responsible will face appropriate consequences." "I trust you to handle it properly," Marcus said. "But, Captain, I hope the consequences include education, not just punishment. People can change if they're given the chance to learn." David looked at Marcus with deep respect. Here was a man who had been treated terribly, yet he was still thinking about redemption and growth. "You're very gracious, Mr. Wellington." "I'm just trying to make the world a little better," Marcus said simply. "We all should be." Marcus gathered his backpack and walked off the plane. As he entered the terminal, he saw a group of people waiting for him. They were executives from his foundation. They held a sign that said, "Welcome, Mr. Wellington." Behind him, still on the plane, Rebecca had emerged from the back galley. She was required to stand at the door and say goodbye to passengers as they left. It was airline policy, but very few passengers acknowledged her. Most just walked past without looking at her. As the last passengers left, Rebecca saw the group in the terminal holding the sign. She saw the executives in expensive suits greeting Marcus warmly. She heard someone say, "The foundation meeting tomorrow," and "the billion-dollar initiative." Rebecca's heart stopped. She pulled out her phone and searched Marcus Wellington. Her hands were shaking as she read. Technology entrepreneur, billionaire, philanthropist, founder of Wellington Tech, major donor to education and civil rights causes. The passenger she had treated like trash was one of the most successful and respected businessmen in America. He was someone who gave away millions to help others, someone who used his wealth and power to make the world better, and she had given him a plastic cup and a stale sandwich. Rebecca felt sick, not just because he was rich and powerful, but because it didn't matter who he was. He could have been anyone. He deserved respect as a human being, not because of his bank account. She watched through the window as Marcus walked away with his colleagues. He was laughing at something someone said. He looked happy and relaxed. He wasn't angry or upset. He had already moved on, but Rebecca knew she would remember this day for the rest of her life. 2 weeks had passed since Flight 247 landed in London. 2 weeks that felt like a lifetime to Rebecca Chen. She sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone. She had received the call an hour ago. The airline wanted to see her tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Human resources, management, her supervisor. She knew what it meant. They were going to fire her. Rebecca had not slept well since that flight. Every night she replayed the events in her mind. The plastic cup, the refused blanket, the sandwich, the look on Marcus Wellington's face, the disappointed faces of the other passengers, Captain Morrison's angry words, her own terrible admission. He doesn't belong in first class. She felt shame burn through her body every time she remembered saying those words. What had she been thinking? Why had she treated him that way? Rebecca knew the answer, even though it was hard to admit. She had judged Marcus from the moment she saw him. She had made assumptions based on how he looked and what he wore. She had decided he didn't belong and she had treated him accordingly. It wasn't the first time. Patricia had been right about that. There had been other passengers over the years. Not many, but enough. Rebecca had convinced herself she wasn't prejudiced. She had told herself she treated everyone equally. But that was a lie. Deep down, she knew it was a lie. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from James, the young flight attendant who had worked with her that day. They had exchanged numbers months ago. "Hey, I know tomorrow is your meeting. Good luck. Whatever happens, I hope you learn from this." Rebecca stared at the message. James had been required to complete additional training. He had told her about it last week, courses on diversity, inclusion, and bystander intervention. He said it had opened his eyes to things he never thought about before. "I didn't realize how often I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up," James had told her. "Not just with you, but in other situations too. I thought staying out of conflict was the right thing to do. But sometimes silence is just as bad as the wrong action." Rebecca hadn't known what to say to that. She had been so focused on her own fear and shame that she hadn't thought about James's experience. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. She lay in bed and thought about her life. She thought about how she had been raised and what she had been taught. Her parents had never used racial slurs or said hateful things, but there had been subtle messages. Warnings about certain neighborhoods, comments about certain kinds of people, small assumptions that had seemed normal at the time. Rebecca had absorbed those messages without questioning them. She had carried them into adulthood, and on Flight 247 they had finally been exposed for what they were: prejudice. The next morning, Rebecca dressed carefully for the meeting. She wore her best suit. She brushed her hair until it shone. She wanted to look professional and respectful, but her hands shook as she applied her makeup. Her stomach felt like it was full of rocks. She arrived at the airline headquarters 30 minutes early. The building was tall and modern, with glass walls and the airline logo displayed prominently. Rebecca had always felt proud to work for this company. Now she felt like an embarrassment. She sat in the waiting area outside Human Resources. Other employees walked past, going about their normal day. They had no idea why she was there. She was grateful for that. At exactly 9 o'clock, a woman in a gray suit opened the door. "Rebecca Chen?" "Yes," Rebecca stood up quickly. "Please come with me." Rebecca followed her down a long hallway. Her heart was pounding. They entered a conference room. 3 people sat at a large table. Her supervisor, Linda Martinez, a man from Human Resources named Kevin Patel, and a woman Rebecca didn't recognize. "Please sit down, Rebecca," Linda said. Her voice was not unkind, but it wasn't warm either. Rebecca sat. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "I'm sure you know why you're here," Linda began. "We've completed our investigation into the incident on Flight 247. We've reviewed Captain Morrison's report. We've interviewed other crew members and passengers. And we've reviewed your employment history." Rebecca nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Kevin spoke next. Rebecca, you've worked for this airline for 5 years. In that time, your performance reviews have been mostly positive. You're usually punctual. You follow procedures. Until this incident, there have been no major complaints. Rebecca felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe they wouldn't fire her. Maybe they would just give her a warning. But then the woman Rebecca didn't recognize spoke. However, she said, what happened on Flight 247 was extremely serious. I'm Carol Williams from our Legal and Compliance Department. What you did constitutes clear discrimination based on race. The passenger could file a lawsuit against the airline. Other passengers who witnessed the incident could support his claim. This puts the entire company at risk. The tiny spark of hope died. Rebecca felt tears start to form. More importantly, Linda said, it violated everything this airline stands for. We promised to treat every passenger with respect and dignity. You broke that promise. You made a passenger feel unwelcome and unwanted. You made other passengers uncomfortable, and you brought shame to your fellow crew members who work hard to provide excellent service. I know, Rebecca whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I acted that way. I was wrong. So wrong. Why did you do it? Linda asked directly. We need to understand. Rebecca took a shaky breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. But she knew she had to be honest. She had to face the truth. I judged him based on how he looked, Rebecca said. Her voice was barely audible. I saw what he was wearing and I made assumptions. I decided he didn't belong in first class. I treated him badly because of those assumptions. It was prejudice. I see that now. The room was quiet for a moment. Carol made notes on her laptop. Kevin watched Rebecca carefully. Linda's expression was sad. Have you treated other passengers this way before? Kevin asked. Rebecca wanted to lie. She wanted to say no, but she couldn't. Not anymore. Yes, she admitted. Not often. Not every flight. But there have been a few times over the years when I made similar judgments. I didn't think of it as discrimination. I convinced myself I had good reasons. But I was wrong. I was wrong every time, Linda nodded slowly. At least you're being honest now. That's something. The question is, what do we do about this? Carol said. The passenger, Mr. Wellington, has not filed a formal complaint. In fact, he specifically requested that we contact him before making any final decisions about your employment. Rebecca looked up in shock. He what? Mr. Wellington asked to be informed of the outcome of our investigation, Carol said. He said he wanted to have input on how this situation is resolved. So I called him yesterday and explained what we were planning to do. You spoke with him? Rebecca felt her face go hot with shame. What did he say? Linda looked at Rebecca with an expression that was hard to read. He asked us not to fire you. Rebecca was so shocked she couldn't speak for a moment. He asked you not to fire me? Why would he do that? He said that terminating your employment would be punishment, but it wouldn't create change, Linda explained. He believes in education and growth, not just consequences. He thinks you can become better if you're given the chance to learn. Tears started rolling down Rebecca's face. She couldn't stop them. Marcus Wellington, the man she had treated terribly, the man she had humiliated and disrespected, was showing her mercy. He was giving her a chance when she didn't deserve one. However, Kevin said firmly, that doesn't mean there are no consequences. Mr. Wellington's request was part of a larger proposal. He has offered to fund a comprehensive diversity and inclusion program for our entire airline. His foundation will donate $5 million for this purpose. Rebecca wiped her eyes, trying to focus on what Kevin was saying. The program will include mandatory training for all employees, Kevin continued. Training on unconscious bias, cultural sensitivity, and how to create an inclusive environment. There will also be regular workshops and educational sessions. Mr. Wellington wants to help the entire company do better, not just punish you. As part of this arrangement, Carol added, your employment will be suspended without pay for 2 weeks. When you return, you will be on probation for 6 months. You will complete all the required diversity training, plus additional one-on-one sessions with a specialist. You will work in economy class during your probation period, not first class. And if there is even one complaint about your behavior during that time, you will be terminated immediately. Do you understand? Rebecca nodded. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me another chance. Don't thank us, Linda said. Thank Marcus Wellington. He's the one who made this possible. There's something else, Carol said. She pulled an envelope from her folder. Mr. Wellington wrote you a letter. He asked us to give it to you today. Rebecca took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. She looked at the three people across the table. You can read it now if you want, Linda said, or take it home. It's up to you. I'll read it now, Rebecca said quietly. She needed to know what it said. She opened the envelope carefully and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The letter was handwritten, not typed. Rebecca began to read. Dear Rebecca, you don't know me, but I know what happened between us on Flight 247. I'm writing this letter because I believe in second chances. I believe people can change and grow if they're willing to do the hard work of examining themselves honestly. What you did on that flight was wrong. You know that now. You hurt me. Not because of the plastic cup or the sandwich, but because of what those actions represented. You made me feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't worthy of basic respect. That kind of pain goes deep, but I've learned something in my life. Anger and punishment don't create lasting change. They might make us feel better temporarily, but they don't solve the real problem. The real problem is ignorance, fear, assumptions we make without thinking, beliefs we hold without questioning. I don't want you to lose your job. I want you to become better at your job. I want you to understand why what you did was harmful. I want you to grow into someone who treats every person with dignity, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. This won't be easy. It's hard to look at ourselves and admit our flaws. It's painful to realize we've hurt others, but that discomfort is where growth happens. Lean into it. Learn from it. Let it transform you. I'm giving you this chance because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. Years ago I made mistakes too. Different mistakes, but mistakes nonetheless. A mentor showed me grace and helped me become better. Now I'm passing that grace forward to you. Don't waste this opportunity. Use it to become the person you're capable of being. And when you encounter others who make the same mistakes you made, show them the same mercy I'm showing you now. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. I hope you'll take this journey seriously. I hope you'll do the hard work of unlearning harmful beliefs and replacing them with understanding and compassion. And I hope that one day you'll help others do the same. Sincerely, Marcus Wellington. By the time Rebecca finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. She couldn't speak. The words on that page had broken something open inside her. This man, this stranger she had wronged, was offering her grace she didn't deserve. He was giving her a chance to be better. Linda pushed a box of tissues across the table. Rebecca took several and wiped her face. He's an extraordinary person, Linda said quietly. When I spoke with him on the phone, he spent more time talking about how to help you improve than about what you did wrong. That's rare. I don't deserve this, Rebecca said through her tears. Maybe not, Kevin said. But you're getting it anyway. The question is, what will you do with it? Rebecca looked down at the letter again. She read the words, become the person you're capable of being. She thought about who she had been on Flight 247. Judgmental. Cold. Cruel. Was that who she really was? Or was that just who she had become by not questioning her assumptions? I'll do better, Rebecca said firmly. I promise. I'll do the training. I'll do the work. I'll become better. We'll be watching, Carol said. Remember, this is your only chance. There won't be another one. I understand, Rebecca said. I won't let you down. I won't let Mr. Wellington down. The meeting ended. Rebecca walked out of the building in a daze. The sun was bright. The air was warm. The world looked the same as it had when she walked in. But everything felt different. She sat in her car for a long time just thinking. She read Marcus's letter 3 more times. Each time different words stood out to her. People can change. Growth happens in discomfort. Pass that grace forward. Rebecca thought about her 2-week suspension. No pay meant money would be tight. But she needed this time. She needed to think, to learn, to change. She pulled out her phone and searched for books about unconscious bias and racism. She found several highly recommended titles and ordered them immediately. If she was going to do this, she was going to do it right. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca did something she had never done before. She educated herself. She read books about the history of discrimination in America. She watched documentaries about the civil rights movement. She listened to podcasts where people shared their experiences with racism and prejudice. It was painful. There were many times when she wanted to stop reading or turn off the video. It was hard to confront the reality of how her actions fit into a much larger pattern of discrimination. It was difficult to admit how much she hadn't known or hadn't wanted to see, but she kept going. She took notes. She cried. She got angry at herself, and slowly she began to understand. She understood that Marcus Wellington wasn't just one passenger who had a bad experience. He was one of millions of people who faced judgment and mistreatment every single day. She understood that her actions weren't just rude behavior. They were part of a system that told certain people they were less valuable than others. Most importantly, she understood that ignorance wasn't an excuse. She should have known better. And now that she did know better, she had a responsibility to do better. Rebecca also reached out to James. They met for coffee one afternoon. James told her more about his training. The hardest part was realizing how many times I saw something wrong and stayed quiet. James said, I always thought of myself as a good person. But being good means speaking up even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. I'm sorry I put you in that position, Rebecca said. You tried to tell me I was wrong about the meal service. I should have listened. Yes, you should have, James agreed. But I should have insisted. I should have told Captain Morrison myself if you wouldn't listen. We both failed that day. We just failed in different ways. They talked for 2 hours. It felt good, to be honest. To admit mistakes. To commit to doing better. When Rebecca's suspension ended, she returned to work nervous but determined. She completed the required diversity training. The sessions were intense and challenging. They made her confront things about herself she had never wanted to examine. In one exercise, she had to write about a time when she felt excluded or judged. She wrote about being a young flight attendant when male passengers didn't take her seriously. She wrote about how it felt to be dismissed and underestimated. And then she realized with painful clarity that she had made Marcus Wellington feel exactly that way. The training also included guest speakers, people who shared their experiences with discrimination. Their stories were powerful and heartbreaking. Rebecca cried during many of the presentations. But she also listened. Really listened. 6 months later, Rebecca completed her probation period. She had worked in economy class with perfect behavior. Passengers had given her positive reviews. Her coworkers said she seemed different, more thoughtful, more empathetic. Linda called her into the office. Rebecca's heart raced. Was this another problem? Had she done something wrong? But Linda was smiling. Your probation is over, Rebecca. You've successfully completed all requirements. You can return to first-class service if you want to. Rebecca felt relief wash over her. Thank you. Thank you so much. You've done well, Linda said. You've taken this seriously. That's what we hoped for. I have a question, Rebecca said hesitantly. Is there any way I could thank Mr. Wellington? I'd like to write him a letter. To tell him what his grace meant to me. To let him know I've changed. Linda considered this. I'll pass your letter along if you write one. But Rebecca, the best way to thank him is to become an advocate for change yourself. Help others learn what you've learned. That's what he really wants, Rebecca nodded. She understood. The next evening, she sat down and wrote a letter to Marcus Wellington. She told him about the book she had read and the training she had completed. She told him about the ways she was working to challenge her own assumptions every day. She told him she would spend the rest of her career trying to make up for what she had done. She ended the letter with a promise. I will pass your grace forward. I will help others learn and grow. I will be better. Thank you for believing I could be. Rebecca sealed the envelope and gave it to Linda the next day. She didn't know if Marcus would ever read it. She didn't know if he would respond, but she needed to write it anyway. She needed to express her gratitude and her commitment to change. What Rebecca didn't know was that her transformation was just beginning, and that in 6 months she would have a chance to prove everything she had learned. 6 months had passed since Rebecca completed her probation. She was back working in first class, but everything felt different now. She approached her job with new eyes and a new heart. Every passenger she served received genuine warmth and respect. She noticed when people seemed uncomfortable or excluded. She spoke up when she saw her co-workers making the kinds of mistakes she used to make. Rebecca had become known among the crew as someone who cared deeply about doing things right. When new flight attendants joined the team, she often volunteered to mentor them. She talked openly about her own mistakes and what she had learned. It was uncomfortable to share her story, but she knew it was important. One Tuesday morning, Rebecca arrived at work to find a notice posted in the crew room. The airline was launching its new diversity and inclusion training program, the program that Marcus Wellington's foundation had funded. They were looking for current employees to participate in the development and delivery of the training. Rebecca's heart raced as she read the announcement. This was it. This was her chance to truly make a difference, to turn her biggest mistake into something meaningful. She applied immediately. A week later, she received an interview. She sat across from a panel of 3 people: Linda Martinez, a training specialist named Dr. Sarah Kim, and someone from Marcus Wellington's foundation. "Why do you want to be part of this program?" Dr. Kim asked. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Because I know what it's like to be the problem. I was the person this program is designed to help. I discriminated against a passenger. I treated him terribly because of my own prejudice and ignorance. And because of Mr. Wellington's grace, I was given a chance to learn and change instead of just being punished." She paused, gathering her courage. "I want to help other people learn without having to hurt someone first. I want to share my story so they can understand the impact of their actions. I want to be part of the solution." The panel members exchanged glances. The representative from the foundation leaned forward. "That takes courage, Rebecca. To admit your mistakes publicly. To use your story as a teaching tool. Are you really ready for that?" "Yes," Rebecca said firmly. "I've spent the last year learning and growing. Now I want to help others do the same. My shame doesn't go away by hiding it. It transforms into something useful by sharing it." A month later, Rebecca received the news. She had been selected. She would be one of 12 employees trained to help deliver the new diversity and inclusion program. She would attend intensive training herself, then help facilitate sessions for other airline employees. The training was the hardest thing Rebecca had ever done. It was intense and emotional. She learned about systemic racism, unconscious bias, microaggressions, and the history of discrimination. She learned facilitation skills and how to handle difficult conversations. She practiced responding to resistance and defensiveness with compassion instead of judgment. And she prepared to share her story, to stand in front of her colleagues and admit what she had done, to be vulnerable in a way that terrified her. The first official training session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. It would be held in the airline's main training facility. 60 flight attendants would attend. Rebecca would be one of 3 facilitators, along with Dr. Kim and another employee who had completed the training program. The morning of the session, Rebecca woke up early. Her stomach was in knots. She reviewed her notes over and over. She practiced what she would say, but no amount of preparation could calm her nerves completely. She arrived at the training center an hour early. The room was large, with rows of chairs facing a small stage and projection screen. Dr. Kim was already there, setting up equipment. "Nervous?" Dr. Kim asked with a kind smile. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "That's normal. But remember, your story has power because it's real. Because you're not preaching from a place of perfection. You're teaching from a place of growth. That's what will reach people." Employees began to arrive. Rebecca recognized many of them. She had worked with some for years. They chatted and joked as they found seats. They had no idea what this session would involve. Many probably thought it would be boring corporate training they had to sit through. At exactly 2 o'clock, Dr. Kim welcomed everyone and explained the purpose of the program. She talked about the airline's commitment to creating an inclusive environment for both passengers and employees. She explained that the training was funded by Marcus Wellington's foundation. Some of you may remember a significant incident that occurred on Flight 247 several months ago, Dr. Kim said. The room got quieter. That incident is part of why we're here today. But rather than have me explain what happened, I'm going to let someone tell you directly. Rebecca. Rebecca stood up on shaky legs and walked to the front of the room. 60 pairs of eyes watched her. Some looked curious. Some looked bored. Some looked supportive. She recognized a few faces from Flight 247. James was there, giving her an encouraging nod. "Hi, everyone," Rebecca began. Her voice was quiet at first. "My name is Rebecca Chen. I've been a flight attendant with this airline for 5 years. And several months ago I did something terrible that I need to tell you about." The room was completely silent now. Everyone was paying attention. Rebecca told them everything. She described Flight 247 in painful detail. The plastic cup, the refused blanket, the sandwich. Her own words, he doesn't belong in first class. She didn't leave anything out. She didn't make excuses or try to make herself look better. I discriminated against a passenger because of the color of his skin, Rebecca said. Her voice was stronger now. I made assumptions based on how he looked. I treated him like he was less than everyone else in that cabin. And I hurt him. I hurt other passengers who had to witness it. I hurt my coworkers, and I brought shame to this airline. Some people in the audience looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few were nodding, recognizing the story. That passenger was Marcus Wellington, Rebecca continued, a successful businessman and philanthropist who was traveling to London for a charity meeting. He could have sued the airline. He could have had me fired. He could have destroyed my career and reputation, and he would have been completely justified. Rebecca paused and took a breath. But he didn't. Instead, he asked the airline to give me a chance to learn and change. He funded this entire program so that all of us could learn. He showed me grace I didn't deserve. And because of that grace, I'm standing here today. She could see tears in some people's eyes. Others looked deeply moved. I'm not sharing this story to make you feel sorry for me, Rebecca said. I'm sharing it because I want you to understand something important. I didn't think of myself as a racist person. I didn't use slurs or express hatred. I thought I was a good person who treated everyone equally, but I was wrong. Rebecca walked closer to the audience. I had unconscious biases I never examined. I had assumptions I never questioned. And when I acted on those biases, I hurt someone. That's what this training is about. It's about recognizing the biases we all have and learning to challenge them before they harm others. She spent the next 20 minutes talking about what she had learned, about how uncomfortable it had been to confront her own prejudice, about the books she had read and the stories she had heard, about how her perspective had changed. Change is possible, Rebecca said. I'm proof of that. But it requires honesty. It requires humility. It requires being willing to feel uncomfortable and do the hard work of examining yourself. And it requires grace, both receiving it and extending it to others. When Rebecca finished, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was genuine appreciation for her courage and vulnerability. People stood up. Many were crying. James was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Dr. Kim returned to the front. Thank you, Rebecca. That took tremendous courage. She turned to the audience. What Rebecca shared today is the foundation of this program. We're not here to shame anyone or point fingers. We're here to learn and grow together. The session continued with exercises and discussions. People shared their own experiences with bias and discrimination. They talked about times when they had been treated unfairly and times when they had unknowingly hurt others. The conversations were honest and raw and necessary. At the end of the 3-hour session, many attendees came up to thank Rebecca personally. They told her how much her story had affected them. They shared their own struggles with unconscious bias. They committed to doing better. James hugged her tightly. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. You took the worst moment of your career and turned it into something beautiful. Over the next several months, Rebecca facilitated dozens of training sessions. She told her story again and again. It never got easier, but it always felt important. She saw the impact it had on people. She watched coworkers examine their own behaviors and commit to change. The program became known as one of the most effective diversity trainings in the aviation industry. Other airlines asked about it. Marcus Wellington's foundation featured it as a success story, and at the center of it all was Rebecca's testimony, proof that people could change if they were given the chance. One afternoon, Rebecca received an unexpected email. It was from Linda Martinez. The subject line said, "Special Visitor." Rebecca opened it with curiosity. Marcus Wellington will be visiting our headquarters next week to review the diversity program his foundation funded. He has specifically requested to attend one of the training sessions. He would like you to facilitate. Are you available? Rebecca's hands started shaking. Marcus Wellington wanted to attend her session? The man she had wronged? The man whose grace had changed her life? He wanted to hear her tell the story of how badly she had treated him? She replied immediately, "Yes, I'll be there." The next week felt like the longest week of Rebecca's life. She couldn't sleep. She practiced her presentation 100 times. What would she say to him? How could she ever express her gratitude adequately? The day finally came. Rebecca arrived at the training center extra early. She wore her best professional outfit. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was racing. The room filled with employees. And then quietly Marcus Wellington entered. He wore simple clothes just like on Flight 247. He had that same calm, dignified presence. He sat in the back row trying not to draw attention to himself. But Rebecca saw him immediately. Their eyes met across the room. Marcus smiled gently and nodded. Rebecca felt tears start to form, but she blinked them away. She had work to do. Dr. Kim introduced the session and invited Rebecca to share her story. Rebecca walked to the front just like she had dozens of times before. But this time was different. This time the man she had hurt was listening. Rebecca told the story. Every detail, every mistake, every moment of shame. But this time she also talked about what happened after. About Marcus's letter. About his grace. About how his decision to fund education instead of pursuing punishment had changed not just her life, but potentially hundreds of lives through this program. The man I treated so terribly on Flight 247 is here today, Rebecca said. Her voice cracked with emotion. Mr. Wellington, would you be willing to stand so everyone can see the person whose grace made all of this possible? Marcus stood up slowly. The entire room turned to look at him. Then as one, every person in that room stood up and applauded. It was thunderous. It was heartfelt. It was genuine appreciation for what he had done. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he nodded his thanks and sat back down. Rebecca continued the session, but she felt lighter somehow, like a weight she had been carrying for months had finally lifted. After the session ended, people gathered around Marcus, thanking him and asking questions. He was gracious and kind to everyone. Finally, as the crowd thinned, Rebecca approached him. They stood face to face for the first time since Flight 247. Mr. Wellington, Rebecca began. Her voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for me. I don't know how to apologize enough for how I treated you. And Marcus held up his hand gently. You don't need to apologize again. Your work here, what you're doing for others, that's the apology. That's the gratitude. You took a painful experience and turned it into something that's helping hundreds of people learn and grow. That's everything I hoped for. But why? Rebecca asked. Why did you show me such grace when I treated you so badly? Marcus smiled sadly. Because someone once showed me grace when I needed it. And because I believe that people are more than their worst moments. You made a terrible mistake, Rebecca, but you're not a terrible person. You proved that by doing the hard work of change. I'll never forget what you did for me, Rebecca said. I'll spend the rest of my career passing your grace forward to others. That's all I ask, Marcus said. He shook her hand warmly. Thank you for having the courage to share your story. Thank you for turning shame into purpose. The world needs more people willing to admit their mistakes and help others avoid making the same ones. As Marcus walked away, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt proud of herself. Not proud of what she had done on Flight 247, but proud of what she had done since. Proud of how she had changed. Proud of the difference she was making. That evening, Rebecca sat in her apartment and reflected on the journey she had taken. From that terrible day on Flight 247 to this moment of redemption, it had been painful. It had been difficult. But it had been necessary. She thought about all the people who would go through the training program, all the passengers who would be treated better, because someone had learned not to make her mistakes, all the grace that would ripple outward from Marcus Wellington's single act of mercy. Rebecca opened her laptop and began to write. She was working on a training manual that would help other airlines develop similar programs. She wanted to spread this message as far as possible. She wanted Marcus's grace to reach as many people as it could. As she typed, Rebecca smiled. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined to make the most of it. Not just for herself, but for everyone who would be touched by this program, for every passenger who would be treated with dignity, for every employee who would learn to challenge their biases before they caused harm. Marcus Wellington had stunned the crew of Flight 247 with his response. But the real stunning part wasn't just his grace in that moment. It was the ripple effect of change that spread from that grace. It was Rebecca's transformation. It was the hundreds of employees who learned from her story. It was the thousands of passengers who would be treated better because one man chose education over punishment. That was the real miracle. Not just that one person changed, but that their change inspired others to change too. And in that way, Marcus Wellington's grace became something much bigger than a single act of kindness. It became a movement, a culture shift, a new way of thinking about mistakes and redemption and the power of second chances. And it all started with a plastic cup on a flight to London.